Life, such as it is, inevitably reveals the truth. If one thinks that his actions will go unnoticed, such a notion is a clear delusion. My wife assumed that I was too naive to know about her secret. However, life presented me with a situation that revealed all the cards one fall day. At the time, the high school soccer team my daughter was playing on was showing a solid 5-2 lead against Frost. The game was heading toward its conclusion in the second half. My youngest daughter, Carrie, had already scored 2 goals and was on the verge of completing a hat trick. She moved confidently up and down the field, evading the last defenders. While one of them tried to stop her, she maneuvered spectacularly, beating him first to the right, then shifting sharply to the left. To the applause and stares of the enthusiastic spectators, including her mother and me, she dynamically continued her attack. Apparently, all the training and camps we had sent her to were about to bear fruit. However, her opponent, in a last-ditch effort to stop Carrie, knocked her down. My daughter flew into the air and after a few somersaults ended up on the ground. The referee immediately called a penalty, prompting a violent reaction from the coaches. From the bleachers where I was standing, I saw Carrie grabbing her leg and let out a cry of pain. The game was stopped, and without thinking, I ran onto the field. After hugging my daughter, I hurried to the coach who was already examining her leg. When she screamed again, the coach quickly pulled out his phone and called for an ambulance. I comforted Carrie as she sobbed. Soon my wife Tracy joined us on the field. A few minutes later, an ambulance pulled up. The paramedics quickly loaded Carrie into the car. I was instructed to have Tracy meet us at the hospital. Upon arrival, Carrie was immediately sent for x-rays. The examination revealed that she had a broken right fibula. Doctors determined the need for orthopedic surgery to align the bone, a procedure called open repositioning. Carrie cried as she realized her sports season was over. Despite my attempts to comfort her, she remained inconsolable. While waiting for the orthopedist, the nurse examined the numerous bruises on Carrie's legs. Bruises are common in soccer players due to the physical nature of the sport. The nurse then turned her attention to the bruises on Carrie's arms. After a brief questioning, she conferred quietly with a coworker. The nurse's attention got me thinking. One of the nurses approached and quietly asked if I had noticed any weight loss in my daughter. I had indeed noticed a slight weight loss, but assumed it was due to being active, including soccer games and workouts. I nodded in acknowledgement and she returned to her coworker, continuing the quiet conversation. Shortly after arriving, the orthopedist reviewed the x-rays and began giving instructions. Carrie was taken to the operating room. Tracy and I proceeded to wait. When Tracy and I were eventually allowed to join Carrie in the recovery room, she was still conscious. We stayed with her for another 2 hours before heading home for the night. The doctor assured us that the surgery had been a success. He said our daughter would be able to go home in a couple days. The next day, I went to my accounting job and Tracy stayed home. She later went to the hospital to be with Carrie. About an hour after my workday started, Tracy called me. She informed me that the doctor wanted to talk to both of us. We were puzzled. I thought the orthopedic surgeon had already confirmed the success of the surgery. Perhaps he wanted to discuss the details of rehabilitation. When I got to my daughter's room, I kissed Tracy and Carrie. A few moments later, Dr. Ben Rowe walked in. This confused me as the orthopedic surgeon was Dr. James Rinkin. Dr. Rowe asked Tracy and I to join him in a small conference room. "What's wrong, doctor?" I asked immediately. Dr. Rowe lowered his gaze, took a deep breath, and then looked at us again. It was then that I sensed the news was not going to be good. "We need to run more tests because we suspect Carrie may have leukemia," he said quietly. Tracy burst into tears, and I suddenly felt like I couldn't breathe. This news was perhaps the most devastating since my parents told me about my grandfather's death when I was 12 years old. Dr. Rowe, Tracy, and I walked back to Carrie's room. We decided not to explain to her the specific reason for the additional tests, desperately hoping we would never have to reveal the whole truth to her. We decided not to inform Carrie's older siblings of the doctor's suspicions, although we did tell them that she was undergoing additional testing. Carrie's older brother, Ari, age 19 and a sophomore at the University of Michigan, was notified by phone of Carrie's broken leg and the need for further evaluation. He offered to come home for a few days, but we assured him that was not required and tried to maintain optimism. Ellie, Carrie's older sister, 17, a high school student, sensed our anxiety despite our attempts to hide it. As the youngest in the family, Carrie, whose real name is Karen, had always gotten a lot of attention from her siblings. Ellie often involved her in her friendship activities, and Ari not only protected her, but also spent hours teaching her sports skills. As a boy, Carrie participated in jogging and excelled in basketball, soccer, and street hockey, showing perseverance comparable to any boy. Ari felt endless pride in his little sister. 2 days later, we received confirmation of the disturbing news. Ellie and I decided it was time for a serious family meeting. Gathered in the living room, we came to a unanimous decision. We must tell Carrie the truth without delay. After consulting with Ari and getting his agreement, we realized the gravity of the situation. Rarely had we seen Ari so emotional as he had been since his childhood incident with a baseball that left pain and a scar on his back. He cried, and after a brief pause, he apologized to me, expressing regret for his tears and for not being able to be there for his sister at such a crucial time. The next morning when the doctor and I entered Carrie's room, I felt like a member of a firing squad. Although Dr. Ralph had offered to break the bad news that our family had discussed and decided that one of us should take on the task, I was given perhaps the most difficult responsibility I had ever faced. Tracy and Ellie sat next to me, tears streaming down their faces. Even Dr. Rawl seemed visibly agitated, which was unusual for him. Carrie, on the other hand, took the news with surprising equanimity, occasionally turning to the doctor for clarification. Her courage, despite her young age of 14, was impressive. 9 months into her treatment, Carrie's situation had not improved markedly. For the first time, the doctor broached the topic of bone marrow transplants. With a little research, we learned that the siblings had a 1 in 4 chance of matching. Ari and Ellie were immediately tested, but the results were not a match. This meant our hope now depended on the slim chance of finding a match in the National Bone Marrow Registry. More than 14 years ago, after a conflict, I left Rick Gardino in the back parking lot of First National Financial. I intended to never cross paths with him again. Now, however, his help, or that of his offspring, may have been desperately needed for Carrie. Gardino lived and worked in a city an hour west of us. I knew he wouldn't be happy to see me. Frankly, I didn't like the prospect of this meeting either. I don't know where to start. I barely audibly whispered to Tracy one Saturday night after putting the kids to bed. We were sitting in the living room. I was sipping rye and she was sipping marrow. "We need to talk," she said. I had no idea what to expect. "I'm pregnant, Tommy. This is no joke. I blew it. I really messed it up," she continued. I sat there in shock. I couldn't put my shock into words. After Ellie was born 5 years ago, Tracy had asked me to have a vasectomy and I had agreed. Apparently, the baby she was carrying was not mine. When my brain finally started working, I felt the bile rising in my throat. I barely made it to the bathroom before last night's dinner reappeared. I got up and walked back into the living room, finding Tracy still uncomfortable moving from place to place. I threw her a sharp look, encouraging her to speak. "I'm 2 months pregnant," she murmured. "You know I'm against abortion, and I know you are too. What options do we have? When you say we, is it about you and me or you and your partner?" Tracy looked stunned, and I suspected her grief was genuine. "So who is he, Tracy? How long has this been going on?" My tone was harsh, my stomach twisted, and I was seething with anger, feeling on the verge of using physical force like never before. Her face changed from shock to horrified. Rick Gardino from work. Do you remember the trip to London a couple months ago?" "Yeah, I can piece it together," I mumbled. "Did you have unprotected intimacy with him? How many times?" "We didn't use protection," she admitted. "In the many years since you had your vasectomy, I guess I just stopped thinking about it. I think we got carried away, maybe 5 times." "You move fast in 5 days," I snapped back. "Those were the only times, I swear," she pleaded. I covered my face with my hands. Whether I believed in all of this or not, it didn't matter now. My once perfect world had irrevocably crumbled. "I'm sorry, Tommy. Really, I never meant to hurt you," Tracy apologized. "You cheated on me several times with another man and now you regret it." "Dan it, what the hell did you think was going to happen when I found out?" I shouted. Her face reflected shock. I had never talked to her like that before. Tracy suddenly admitted that she didn't want me to find out everything. "You wouldn't have found out if I hadn't gotten pregnant. It didn't mean anything, it was just intimacy," She said as if I had never found out, everything would have stayed fine. I asked her what I had done to deserve such disrespect. I didn't think so, Tommy. I still love you, she replied. Our relationship, she said, had taken off, and what happened was something else. A little bit from excitement, it was just a game. Oh, so we needed to talk about our problems, and maybe I could get some privileges too, I muttered as a great response. So what now, Tommy? She asked. Well, in a perfect world I'd kill him, but I know that's unrealistic. And if I divorce you, I'll lose Ari and Ellie. I can't let that happen. I walked into our bedroom and packed my suitcase while Tracy sat in tears. For 2 weeks, I had longed for deep conversations with my children, calling them every night, listening to their news. Tracy, with tears in her eyes, begged for my return, trying her best to manipulate being a single parent. One night, Tracy cried on the other end of the line. God, I'm tired of this routine. Why the hell are you crying? It's your fault for breaking your vows, I yelled at her. Numbers have a calming effect. They can immerse you in peace, offering a temporary escape from the trouble my job provided. Numbers are devoid of emotion. I craved clarity, and the numbers only spoke to the fact that I had finally come to a decision. Not necessarily a good one, but a decision nonetheless. I approached the vice president of First National Financial, Rick Gardino, in the employee parking lot as he was about to get into his Lexus. Despite his larger size, I greeted him with a mixture of surprise and anger. After striking him 2 hard blows, I heard him yell, and then I punched him hard, causing him to collapse to the floor. After expressing myself loudly, I yelled to Rick, "If you go near my wife Tracy again, I will make sure that your next encounter with me will be much worse. Do you understand?" He groaned in apparent agreement. At this time, I noticed that other employees had witnessed our argument, which probably prompted them to call the police. After leaving the scene, I headed home. Tracy was shocked to see me again, but she had to wait to get my attention as Ari and Ellie stunned me with their reaction. When Tracy reached out to hug me, I held her back, and she was clearly offended. I assured her that we would discuss everything after we put the kids to bed. I brought rice and wine for our conversation, though it was more of a monologue on my part. After confirming that she still loved me and wanted to stay married, I suggested that if she reaffirmed her commitment, we would stay married and I would raise her child as my own, on the condition that she would never reveal the child's true paternity to Rick. I explained that while I was uncomfortable raising another man's child, I didn't want to miss the opportunity to watch my children grow because of her mistake. I warned her that I would not tolerate another indiscretion, and regaining my trust could be a long process if it happened at all. I assure you, Tommy, I will be a most devoted wife, and I will never give you a reason to leave us again, she exclaimed. We'll have to wait and see, Tracy, we'll have to wait and see, I replied. I realized I had made Tracy's life easier when Rick quit his job the day after our conversation. A month later, they moved when he took a new job. Apparently, Rick wasn't well liked at his former place of employment. The police never showed up after I confronted him in the parking lot, even though several of his co-workers witnessed the altercation. Both of our families kept a low profile. When we announced Tracy's pregnancy, it caused considerable concern. The investigation, led by my family, began immediately. My mother was beyond angry, to put it mildly. "She's making a fool of you, Tommy. Everyone knows you're being duped," she yelled at me over the phone after we shared the news of the pregnancy. I was stunned to know this side of my mother, though I couldn't completely disagree with her. I had carefully presented my point of view to my family members, and they understood my position, but that did not mean they approved of it. Especially my father made his disapproval clear. "You certainly weren't timid," he said. There was no yelling at me from the Tracy family's side. I suspect they were too unaware of Tracy's actions to even meet my gaze. We never told our other children about my vasectomy, so we simply informed them of Tracy's pregnancy. They took the news calmly. Well, Rick's skin color and hair were darker than mine, but I was lucky that Carrie was strikingly similar to her mother with similar facial features, blonde hair, and fair skin. No one even doubted it. Moreover, Carrie had been deeply attached to me from a very young age. She would often follow me around like a faithful puppy when I came home from work. She was adorable, a bit of a tomboy, and just as sweet as my other 2 children. I truly believe I treated her no differently than Ari and Ellie, except perhaps more indulged her, given her status as the youngest. Now my child was in a life-or-death struggle. I needed more than Rick Gardino's personal suffering, given that Gardino and his wife had 3 children, siblings to my Carrie. That gave them a 1 in 8 chance. The following evening after dinner, I arrived at his house and he visibly recoiled when he saw me on the doorstep. I wasn't near her, I swear, he exclaimed, raising his hands in a protective gesture. I know you weren't. I'm not here to confront you. I need your help, I said. He almost fainted with surprise. She finally left you for someone better, he parried with a smirk. I don't need you for her. I need you for someone else. My youngest daughter and I don't really need you, but a few samples from your kids, I clarified. He was more perceptive than I had realized and quickly caught the gist of my words. I have another daughter, and she's in need of a medical emergency. Damn it, why didn't she inform me? I had a right to be informed, at which time his wife appeared in the doorway. He held up his hands in a gesture of surrender. Everything okay, Rick? She asked. Yeah, babe, everything's fine. Just an old friend from the past, he replied. We're going to grab a quick drink and we'll be right back. I pointed to my car. We drove in silence for a couple miles before taking a table at the counter in the restaurant. You have no right to know anything about what I said. I began after we each had a shot of Jack Daniels. She's my daughter, always has been. That was the price Tracy paid to stay in our marriage. My child needs a bone marrow transplant. My other children aren't a match. We need to test your kids. They each have a chance to match, 1 in 8. This is my Carrie's best chance. I swiped my finger across the phone screen and lowered my gaze to the table. Under normal circumstances, I would have had to get him to agree, but this was a request involving a child, technically his child. I realized that time is of the essence. I'll have them tested tomorrow, he murmured. Thank you, I replied in the same muted tone. He hadn't asked to see any pictures of Carrie, and I'd never offered to show him any. We sat in silence until we finished our drinks, then I drove him home. We shook hands before he got out of the car. I assured him I wouldn't tell his wife anything. You can make up any excuse you want, I said, giving him the email address of the hospital where Carrie was. I didn't expect this, Tom. Can you explain why I got 4 tissue samples from the Gardino family? They all came back negative, as expected given our ignorance, Dr. Rull asked during our phone conversation a few days later. What do you mean you don't know who they are? My tone rose. They're all related to blood transfer. One is her biological father, and the other 3 are her half-siblings. Gosh, Dr. Ralph, I guess I didn't see that coming, I said. I hate to break it to you, but none of these people are biologically related to Carrie. What makes you think they are? Damn it, Tom, the doctor interjected. Because I'm the stupidest person in the world, that's why, I shouted. Tom, the doctor tried to bring me back to reality. Don't make any hasty decisions. It's too late for that, doctor. She betrayed me and got me pregnant, claimed it was Rick Gardino's baby. She begged for forgiveness, swore she still loved me. I was caught hook, line, and sinker. I realize it's devastating, Tom, but there may still be a chance for something to save your daughter. We just need to determine if her lover has offspring, and if we can run the tests quickly, there may still be hope, the doctor added. Her condition is deteriorating rapidly. I'll find them, doc. I'll keep you posted, I said. 40 minutes later, I arrived at the First National Financial Office, rushing past the front desk like my pants were on fire. The security guard tried to stop me, but couldn't. I rushed to the elevator and pressed the second floor button. After exiting the elevator, I burst into the office of Tracy, the vice president of the company. She instantly turned a look full of fear on me. I must have looked like an enraged bull, breathing heavily and possibly drooling like a street Bernard. I need a name. It wasn't Rick Gardino. He and his kids aren't responsible. I don't need any more explanations, I said sharply. She burst into tears. I'm in no mood to put up with your fake tears. Stop it, or I'll come over to this table and slap you, I warned. If it wasn't Rick, it must have been Chester Doe. He was working in London that night when I was up with Rick. With Chester, we only had intercourse once. I'm really sorry, Tommy. Really, I couldn't bring myself to tell you about the other man. I wasn't sure you'd forgive me for one. I knew you'd divorce me if it turned out to be 2. We'll deal with that later. Right now, you need to find this guy and have him and all his kids take a bone marrow test. Contact Human Resources and get this organized immediately. Dr. R says Carrie doesn't have much time left. Chester Dull left First National about 3 years after he met Tracy. Tracy had to explain to Human Resources why she needed to contact Doe, and they helped her get the information she needed. She then explained her requirements to Doe, and he promised that he and his 2 children would be tested. Swabs from Doe and his children arrived a week later, and when the tests showed they were related, our communications with my wife dwindled. Eventually, her curiosity led her to ask how I had managed to find Gardino so quickly. I always knew his whereabouts, I replied. Trust, but verify. I just didn't know about the other man, or I would have found him as well. She lowered her head to the table. Our daily routine consisted of work and frequent visits to the hospital room where Carrie lay. Ari came home from time to time to be with his sister. Ellie spent most of her time at the hospital. Dr. Rawl visited us often. We sensed that things were deteriorating rapidly when Carrie's usual wit faded. Then, after what Dr. Rawl called a miraculous event, Carrie began to recover, although it took almost a year. A few months after Dr. Rawl announced her complete remission, I called a family meeting. During the meeting, I revealed the details of Tracy's cases to all the children. The older 2 had already sensed that something was wrong, which led me to believe that this secret should also be revealed. It was extremely difficult to explain to my youngest that she was not my biological daughter, but I emphasized to all 3 that my affection for them remained unchanged. Ari and Ellie enclosed Carrie in a comforting hug as she cried uncontrollably for several minutes. Then I noticed a change in her facial expression as her tears stopped. It's okay, so you forgave her once, but none of us expect it to happen again, right? Ari asked. I shook my head solemnly, excusing myself from further words. So I'm going to deal with my own room, Daddy, because I'm definitely going with you, Carrie announced. She had the opportunity to choose which parent she would prefer as primary caregiver, given that I had recently learned that biologically she wasn't mine. Her announcement took me by surprise. Tears came to my eyes, and soon it was my turn to be comforted. Soon I felt the embrace of 3 pairs of arms around me. Once I got myself under control, I looked at all 3 children. I turned to Carrie, emphasizing the fact that her mother and I had been in contact with her biological father. He hadn't hesitated for a second when Tracy had asked him and his children to be urgently tested for tissue compatibility. Before our appeal, he didn't even know Carrie existed. You can't blame him for that, I said. The responsibility falls on me as much as it does on your mother. I told her not to inform Gardino, who she said was your biological father. Tracy didn't inform Chester Doe, who never admitted to me that he was in that picture. He had already informed his wife about Carrie, and their whole family looks forward to meeting you if you want to. We could plan a vacation to the UK later this year for the 4 of us, I suggested. Tracy tried to contest the divorce, claiming that I had forgiven her affair with Gardino, and doubts arose about the incident. You're kidding, promiscuous man, you don't have a special 2-for-1 deal on this, Tracy. I pointed out that she had betrayed me with 2 different men on the same occasion. That was my limit. Carrie spent very little time with Tracy after the divorce. All 3 children thought their mother had hurt me, but Carrie took it harder. One day, Tracy complained to Carrie, accusing me of sabotaging their relationship out of spite. I made a mistake, Carrie, I'm sorry, but that's no reason for your father to be so angry, she said. Really, Mom, you slept with 2 men in a week while you were on a business trip, and you got pregnant. Dad took it like the magnanimous man he is and stayed married to you so we could stay a family. He gave me his love and his name even though he should have done neither. How about you just shut up? Carrie left Tracy no chance for an answer. I probably should have reprimanded Carrie for saying shut up, but on the other hand, she's 15 years old and I couldn't completely disagree with what she said. During a high school soccer game on a late fall afternoon, when my daughter rushed down the field, with excitement, I stood up from my seat in the bleachers, proudly cheering her on. She masterfully pretended to go to the right, but then shifted sharply to the left. The goalie, trying to anticipate her maneuver, hesitated for a moment, first jumping to the right and then to the left. My daughter, anticipating his movement, confidently and strongly hit the ball into the lower left corner of the goal. My wife and I stood up, bursting into cheers of joy and exchanging high fives before she sat down. I looked at the team bench and exchanged smiles with Coach Carrie, who responded with a triumphant gesture, pointing at me. I responded to her gesture with a smile of my own. In her 26th year, Carrie was already leading the John Adams High School girls soccer team as head coach. Overcoming leukemia, she excelled in high school soccer, earned a scholarship to Duke University, where she played 4 years and graduated with a teaching credential. 4 years later, she returned to coach the same high school team she had played for more than a decade earlier. I sat back down, put my arm around my wife Lorraine, and gently squeezed her hand. Lorraine responded to me with her usual radiant smile. My affection for this woman and for her daughter, whom I considered my own, knew no bounds. Lorraine came into my life 3 years after my divorce from Tracy, bringing a refreshing change. I was almost hesitant to enter the dating scene until I met her. Unlike Tracy, Lorraine was the complete opposite. Tall and slender, with short brown hair, she was 15 years younger, in her 40s, and had an active 8-year-old daughter, Stephanie. Stephanie became fast friends with my daughter Carrie, who passed on her soccer knowledge to her. After a year of dating, I proposed to Lorraine, knowing her past and having experienced infidelity in a previous marriage of 10 years. She fully shared my values about trust and fidelity and respect. Stephanie, reminiscent of Carrie in many ways, quickly found a rapport with us. I happily accepted the role of not only father, but soccer coach for this energetic little girl. My wife and I spent countless hours together cheering in the stands at soccer games. Here is the end of this story. We'll be interested to hear what you think of it. Don't forget to leave a comment, put a like and subscribe to our channel not to miss new, no less interesting and exciting stories. Good luck to you.
Thank you so much for watching my video and your time. Please subscribe to my channel and click on the bell button. Also, I am very interested to know your personal opinion about this story. You can write it in the comments. I will definitely read it and reply to you personally.